Hello, my name is Mark Konrad, and I'm the Executive Director of Global Importune. It's a nonprofit human rights organization, originally based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but now I'm here in London, Ontario. One of the most common questions that people ask me is, how did you get involved in human rights and what you're doing here? And I like to talk about basically my childhood and saying, first of all, I was born in 1955. Yes, I'm an old guy. I'm born in 1955, July 17th, actually, on 1955, which is the exact day that Disneyland actually opened. So Disneyland and myself are both the same age. So I was born in 1955 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The thing about that is that I was never involved in the civil rights movement or the anti-war movement or things like that. It was just a normal childhood, quite frankly. I went to school and I was never involved in politics or anything while I was in Philadelphia during the 60s and 70s, which were really turbulent times, obviously. But for whatever reason, I was just being a normal person. And I think it was my first foray into politics and understanding what was happening around me, the Nixon administration and the Watergate scandal. Now, to many people who don't know about the Watergate scandal, who may not be from the United States, Richard Nixon, the president at that time, was involved in a scandal, whereas he and his administration were involved in a cover-up, where they had people breaking into the Democratic National Convention in 1972. Richard Nixon was a Republican candidate at that time. He was president. He was running for re-election. It eventually led to his political downfall, which was in 1975, I think, where he resigned and was left office. But my point is that up until that time, I was never really interested or involved in anything at that time about politics. One of the things is I would see people demonstrating and protesting on television. I couldn't figure out, what is it? How are they doing this? What was it all about? So at that time, I think that was my first inkling of actually things happening. And my first time actually volunteering for something was called the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon, the Jerry Lewis Telethon at that time. And that was the first time I'd actually volunteered my time. And I think I was maybe 16, 17 years old at the time and volunteered to do something. And one of the things that happened as I was doing that was that I got to interact with people from different cultures. You see, I was from North Philadelphia, which is a black area, a ghetto. And Philadelphia, let me point out also, it's a city of ethnic groups. So you have the Asian area of Philadelphia, you have the Jewish area of Philadelphia, you'd have the Italian area of Philadelphia and black area in Philadelphia. And especially during the 60s, they very rarely mixed. Now, obviously it's different now. When I was 15, 16, and 17 years old, I worked in Wildwood, New Jersey during the summer on the boardwalk at an auction house where they actually auction off articles. And one of the things they were doing there is they encouraging people to come into the auction house and actually purchase materials there. But I actually, as a kid, I was also used to talking, and that's also where I developed kind of a talking style, or feeling comfortable talking to people. So when I was 16, 17, and 18 years old, that's when it was, because I graduated Simon Gratz High School in 1973. So that's also where I developed the whole feeling comfortable actually talking with people. So 1976, as I said, so I began working and volunteering for a number of different organizations at that time, getting involved in demonstrations and just as a participant, a sign holder. In 1979, during this time, the war that was in Northern Ireland was still going on at that time between the Catholics and the Protestants. And I think one of my experiences in Wildwood, New Jersey, when I was a kid, when I was 15, 16, or 17, I got an opportunity to meet Irish girls who had come over from Ireland to work in Wildwood, New Jersey during the summer. So they began talking about their experiences in Northern Ireland, what was happening at that time. And so I found that really interesting. This is my first foray into meeting someone from an international standpoint and finding out there's a much wider world than the North Philadelphia ghetto that I was in. So I met and talked to them, and I was actually corresponding them once they went back to Northern Ireland. The reason I mention that is that I was working in a Wanamaker's department store in 1978, I think, or 79. And I decided for whatever reason that I was going to take some time off. And so I actually went to to England, and I went to visit them in Northern Ireland. So it was my first time I actually been out of the country. And I hitchhiked up through Scotland and then into Northern Ireland at that time, and had a chance to meet with and talk to people in Northern Ireland and find out and talk about which was called the Troubles at that time. So I had the opportunity to talk to them and learn about what was happening from both sides of the experience that I had in Northern Ireland. And so I actually worked for about 2.5 years in the unemployment office, the Office of Employment, actually, for the state of Pennsylvania at that time. And this is during the Reagan administration, where people began losing their jobs. So it was a very interesting job in a sense that I got to meet people who were coming and collecting unemployment. And I must say that I was really good at that. Actually, I was talking to people and kind of making them feel comfortable, because it was very stressful when a person loses their job and they're standing in a line. And you're talking about people who had been, for many of them, who had been working at the job for years, literally 20, 30 years or so, and then all of a sudden they get kicked out. This is what was happening during the 1980s or so, where they were just cast aside for younger people. So there were a lot of people who were traumatized. I got really good at actually talking to people and listening to people as well while they were while they were on the unemployment line, coming on at that time it was a weekly basis, where they would actually come and actually sign a form, and then they would actually have to prove that they had been doing an active job search, and so I would kind of interview them for that. I've been married 3 times. I skipped over my first. I was actually married in 1979. For 4 years. No, from 75 to 79, I was actually married at that time. And but I didn't mention that. The reason I mention this now is because then, when I was working at the unemployment office in the 1980s, I was living with a woman for 7.5 years. So I consider that my second marriage, actually. So I was a stepfather at that time. Was still involved in the peace movement, but not as much as I had before, where we're going to demonstrations and working a lot. So I was doing things like letter writing to letters to the editor, for instance, and doing support work with organizations, peace and social justice organizations at that time. By 1989, the United States was involved in an illegal war in Nicaragua, funding the Contras at that time, which was against congressional approval. And so there was a big issue of things were happening in Nicaragua. And I decided at that time that I would go and find out about the issues and why things were happening. So at that time, I went with an excursion. It was not encouraged by the United States government for an American citizen to go to Nicaragua at that time, because supposedly they were our de facto enemy, because the United States didn't consider them a friendly nation. So whereas I wanted to see what the Contras were doing, and the Sandinista was a legitimate government at that time, and that the United States was trying to overthrow by using the Contras. I went to Nicaragua, spent 2 weeks there with a number of people, talking with people, trying to understand what was happening. And my mission, my objective in a sense, was to actually go and, as well as same thing when I was in Northern Ireland, I would go to places like this and talk to people, and then find out and try to bring as much information back and tell other people. So as opposed opposed to going through the American filter. There was a war also going on in El Salvador, and the United States was backing the wrong side as usual. What was happening in the United States in 1989 was a lot of people were coming from the South, meaning Mexico and El Salvador specifically, where there was a war. They were trying to escape the war. Some of them were political refugees. And what was happening was that a lot of American churches, they would offer sanctuary to refugees that the United States government didn't want. So what the United States government was doing was they were taking these people and they were arresting them and they were sending them back to El Salvador, where they would definitely be possibly tortured, among other things. So, and the reason I was mentioning this is one of my favorite stories. People actually say, well, it's about how I met my wife, actually, Allison. I say that I met her. This is how two atheists meet in a church. In 1989, as I said, this was a sanctuary church. It was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was Phonak, which stands for the First United Methodist Church of Germantown, which is where we met. It was January the 20th, 1989. The reason I remember it is because that was the first day of the first George Bush presidency. So there was a fundraiser at this particular church, and I had actually gone to this church with a friend of mine who I had met at a demonstration, my friend Debbie Bentz. And Debbie Bentz had taken me to Phonak because she was a member. And Allison Konrad at that time, I think it was her first year teaching at the Temple University's Fox School of Business. So she had actually just graduated from Stanford University and moved to Philadelphia at that time. And she was, as I said, she was teaching at the Fox School of Business, and one of her friends, a professor there, actually was a member of Phonak, the First United Methodist Church, and they brought her there. All these people knew each other. It was just like the Unitarian, the Fellowship of London, in a sense where it's a community where everyone knows each other. So I was the only stranger there that I was aware of, everything. And Allison was the only stranger I think is aware of as well. There was a table where they had a whole bunch of merchandise that they were selling for the fundraiser and everything. And on this book, on the table, there was a number of books. And one of the books is a book called Fire in My Bones. Now, the reason this is important is because is because I literally had just seen this guy on the Phil Donahue show maybe 2 weeks beforehand. And this guy, he was a black guy. And his job was to act as kind of a liaison between the black community and the FBI. Now, watching this guy, and the thing about it was this guy had no idea what it's like to be black. He made a lot of money and the FBI was buying this. 2 weeks beforehand, I had seen him on the Phil Donahue program talk show. So I'm walking up to the table and I'm looking at the books and everything. And I'm just looking around. And as I said, I was very frustrated because of everybody was paired up and everything, and I was the only person. And so I'm standing there looking at the book and everything, and I go, and I see it, Fire in My Bones. I picked up the book and I go, God, I hate this guy, out loud. And as a result of me saying that, I heard his voice go, oh, really? Why? What do you mean? And it was Allison Konrad. So the first thing I ever said to her first interaction was me saying, God, I hate this guy, with Allison. And so as a result of that, I began talking about the book and explaining to him why I hate this guy and how he had no idea about what black people's lives are really like and how he was selling this false sense to the members of the FBI to kind of get them oriented to the black community. And so we began talking, and next thing you know, she was also there by herself as well. Well, her friend had brought her. So we had this long conversation. If you actually talk to her, she'll tell you about this hokey magic trick that I actually did for her with a handkerchief in my hand. Evening comes in the end, and we're about to leave, and I just thought, it's just somebody, because I talk to people all the time. I didn't think anything about it and everything. And so I said, well, okay, I'll see you later. It was nice talking to you. And she said, "Oh, can I give you my number?" And I said, "Oh, well, sure. Oh, yeah, yeah." I mean, because in my mind, this was a professor at a university. I'm a guy who just has a high school education. I mean, what am I talking, why would she be interested in me? Anyway, so she actively pursued me, because me, like an idiot, I'm like, oh, what do I know, and everything. So that's how I first met Allison Konrad, January 20th, 1989. So I called her the next day, and we went out on January 21st for our first date. Now, the reason I say January 21st, 1989 also is because, well, we saw the movie Beaches with Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler. And I took her out to a movie, and then we took her out to dinner. And we went to a restaurant, and it was crowded with a whole bunch of people. And the reason I say that particular day was it was Super Bowl Sunday. We had dinner and everything. The reason I mentioned that is that's one of the things that she really liked about me, because of the very fact that I took her out on Super Bowl Sunday, and I wasn't into sports and things. So the very fact that I wasn't this rah-rah Super Bowl Sunday, and I cared about her as opposed to sports, that's one of the things she was saying that endeared me to her. Every year now, we celebrate the anniversary of our first date and the first meeting as well. So we've been doing this now for 37 years or so. By June 24th, 1989, I married Allison Konrad, which in a short period of time, I know, but I definitely knew him. Like I said, and still 37 years later. And by that time, I was working in a broadcast information service. There were a number of VCRs were taping news programs from all over the country. And basically what they would do is they would take those news programs, and if there was a mention in there, let's say of the Campbell soup, they would take that information and then contact Campbell Soup and say, hey, there was a mention of your product in Wyoming, Wisconsin or something or other. Would you be interested in getting a copy of that? So my job was to basically sit in front of TV and watch videotapes from news from all over the country on different issues. The interesting thing about that is I could sit and watch and see how a news program is talking about a specific things that happen, and I can see the slant, the difference, how it's being portrayed in New York versus Tennessee versus Ohio versus Wyoming and things like that. And sometimes it's just a various difference. And this is obviously before Fox News and things, but I got very good at actually seeing patterns in news programs, and also learning about how government worked. Basically, that's what they did with the Broadcast Information Service, and sold information about a particular product that happened to be mentioned on the news to the specific issues. And then it suddenly dawned on me, we were actually talking. Now, the fact that Allison Konrad was working at Temple University, and it dawned on me that this is a great opportunity that I cannot pass up, that I could actually go to get an education, a free education. Eventually went back to school to Temple University studying business administration, because, hey, I wanted to learn from the best, and I knew Allison Konrad was very, very, very good at what she does. I went back and I wanted to get a degree in business administration. So I'm sitting there in class, and this woman is going through, and she's talking about spreadsheets and things like that. It drove me nuts. I could not stand it for there's no way I was going to end up having to study that for 4 years. Spreadsheets and business and everything and normal business. I had to get out. So I eventually ended up changing my major to political science. That's how I became interested in more in political science, and the fact that I had been following a lot about political stuff from the news by working at Broadcast Information Services, because I was watching the news. I studied political science for 4 years at Temple University and graduated from Temple University with a degree in political science in 95, I think. It was a great time. It was one of the best experiences I ever had. I never thought that I would ever go and graduate from college. I was the first person in my definitely my family that had graduated from college in my age group. I was the type of student that professors either loved or hated because I was there to learn. I was there to understand. So I was a challenging student. So if they said something that I didn't understand, I would challenge them and say, well, why is this? I got the reputation for being that guy, either the guy that, challenged them and made them, work and feel comfortable about what they were teaching, or that guy that was the pain in the ass. My favorite story, I can tell you, one of them, political science. So I'm in a political science class and it's being taught by a graduate student. I don't remember the woman's name, but she was a graduate student and she really wasn't, she took my questions as a challenge. I was sitting in the back of the room one day with this guy, and this was during the Clarence Thomas affair. The Clarence Thomas affair involved Anita Hill, and basically it was the first real big issue about sexual harassment and in the workplace. And Clarence Thomas was at that time, he was the nominee for the United States Supreme Court. And Anita Hill had come and claimed sexual harassment about him. And so it was this big thing. And so people were talking about sexual harassment issues. And so I'm sitting in the back and talking with this guy, Duck. And we're talking about political science, he and I. And the class hadn't even started yet. So class starts and we stopped talking. But she saw us talking. She said, so what were you guys talking about? And I said, we were just talking about deep throat. And what we meant was, and we explained it to her, deep throat of Watergate scandal. Watergate scandal basically was, I mentioned about Richard Nixon and political shenanigans. Deep throat was the guy, the informant, who met with the reporters and talked about the Richard Nixon scandal in background. He was called Deep Throat. It had obviously reference to the porn movie, but that's what his name was. So we said to her, we're talking about Deep Throat. So she eventually then went to her supervisor and then said that we were sexually harassing her. So I had to go and explain to her supervisor that, no, I'm not challenging her. I'm not trying to make her feel silly. We were talking about Deep Throat, the political operative during the Watergate scandal. While I was with Alice and Konrad, as I said, I'd been involved in the peace and social justice movement. And one of the other professors was a guy named John Deckup. And John Deckup's wife was a member of Amnesty International. And she invited me to an Amnesty International meeting in 1990, I think, 1989, 1990 or so. And so that's how I originally became involved in Amnesty International. Amnesty International, what they would do is, they still do it now, actually. What they'll do is they will choose the group was 427 or group 428, Chestnut Hill. And what they would do is they would send the group 3 cases to write letters on behalf of. You would write the letters and then you send them out to the organization. I was involved in Amnesty International. We got some really great responses and were able to help get political prisoners released. Obviously, it's just not our group, it's groups all over the world doing the same thing. So I was graduating, and Jamie Love, who worked with Ralph Nader, who was a lobbyist with Ralph Nader, he knew of my work. I was talking with him, and he knew of my work and Amnesty International. He was very impressed with that. As a result, he offered me the opportunity to work during the summer, a summer job with Ralph Nader. So I thought, this is great. I knew who Ralph Nader was. Ralph Nader, the consumer advocate. The reason I'm thinking back is because he was also running for the presidency at the time of the United States in 1996. But you have to realize also, it was a separate entity. He was still doing his consumer advocacy work, but he's also running for the presidency. So that's one of the great things about Ralph. He's able to departmentalize. Anyway, he's
Compartmentalize.
That's it. Departmentalize stuff. So he was able to do that, and it was one of the best experiences also in my life. Actually, seeing the legislative process that actually occurred by being around Ralph and watching him run for the presidency. In 1996, he came in third in the United States presidential election in vote getting. And he taught me the value of third-party candidacies, which, at least in Canada, they understand the value of third-party and even fourth-party candidacies, whereas in the United States, they tend to think that there are only two real parties. I go to Washington, D.C. for the summer internship with Ralph Nader. Ralph's organization, most people are familiar with Public Citizen, the organization that Ralph founded, but his original organization was called the Center for the Study of Responsive Law. Public Citizen came later, actually. So I worked at the Center for the Study of Responsive Law with Ralph Nader. His office actually was right down the hall from where I was working. So I got to know Ralph really well. One of the reasons I got to know Ralph really well is because I was in Washington, D.C., and Allison was still in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, teaching at the university. I could eventually get a job in Washington, D.C., and then Allison come to join me in Washington, D.C. That was the thing. Because eventually I was hired full-time for Ralph at the Center for the Study of Responsive Law. So I worked with Ralph and various other activists on various other issues. I was kind of like an intern, so I was doing a whole lot of everything for everyone, just kind of getting my feet wet. So there have been a number of people who are have influenced me a lot. Obviously, Ralph Nader. Some of my other influences have been Abby Hoffman, the 1960s anti-war activist and environmentalist as well. Bobby Seals of the Black Panther Party, who I've had a chance to meet with, and he was in the Philadelphia area where I lived at that time. And Michael Moore, the filmmaker. And ironically, Michael Moore had actually worked with Ralph Nader, and a lot of what he knows and what he does is he learned from working with Ralph Nader. He was gone by the time I'd gotten there, but as I said, his influence was still there. So those are some of my influences. In Tepoztlán, Mexico was a small town about 35 miles south of Mexico City. Now, planners, industrialists got this brilliant idea they wanted to build a golf course 35 miles just south of Mexico City for the elite to go down and play golf. And what they're going to do is they're going to build it on this land that was communally owned by the people there. It had been for them for generations. And but the people in this small town did not want them to build on this land, and so they demonstrated against the government. Now, many people who wanted to build had vested interests. Many of them were politicians who also ran construction companies or other issues that they would actually profit. So they were against the people of Tepoztlán, demonstrating against them. And so, of course, anytime a group of people organize and demonstrate against the government for their own rights, non-violently, by the way, the government also calls them communists. So clearly this is a communist-inspired revolution that's going on. So as a result, the government decided what we're going to go and do is starve these people out. So what they ended up doing was encircling this town. I mean, it's just a small town there, and wouldn't let very few people in and out in order to intimidate the people of Tepoztlán in order for them to allow the builders to come in and do that. Well, what the government ended up doing was they decided, that didn't work. So what we'll do is we'll try another tactic. So there was a shooting in a market in Tepoztlán at that time, and someone was killed. And so as a result, the government said, we know who's responsible for that, these actions. And so they chose the 3 top heads of this organization that was demonstrating against the golf course. They said, you, and you are responsible for the deaths of this guy. And so they put these guys in prison, both trying to cut off the head of the organization as a result. And this was related to this guy, Andrew Weed, who came back and told it to Ralph Nader, who then told it to me. So my job he gave me was to develop international support on behalf of, they were called the Tepoztlan 3, to help get them out at that time. And he came to me because he had known I had worked on similar type legislation or similar type efforts for Amnesty International political prisoners when I was in Philadelphia and Amnesty International group there. So my job was to do that. I began contacting people all over, trying to get newspaper articles or someone to pay attention to this little place in Tepoztlan, where these people didn't want to have a golf course built, and they didn't want to be maids and butlers in the little hotels that would actually spring up, because government kept saying, oh, it will benefit to your town. There will be hotels, there'll be jobs and everything. And also, they didn't want it also from an environmental standpoint, because the water, in order to keep the grounds green, would be almost half of the water that's used in the entire town there. So that's numerous reasons why they didn't want to do it. I contacted members of the press. No one was interested. I talked to members of Congress at first. No, it was a small little thing. No one was interested. So eventually I ended up doing was talking to people that I knew first, my personal friends, and I decided I would do a letter writing campaign on behalf of the Tepoztlan 3. And so I would go to people, and as I said, people say, oh, no, I don't have the time to do this. I can't do it. And so I decided what I would do is, instead of them writing letters like Amnesty International would do on behalf of a political prisoner, I would write the letters myself, and then I would send the letters to them, read the material. If you agree with it, it's on behalf of the Tepoztlan 3, you sign it, and then send it back to me. I would mail it to them. Some of them I would hand it to them because they would know it, and they would read it and send it back. But other people, I would do it by sending material in the mail to them, and they would read it and send the material back to me. And then I would forward the offending material on to the country, the particular country, which was Mexico at that time. So that was basically the beginnings of Global Importune, because as I said, everybody kept saying, oh, no, I don't have the time to write the letters. Here, I'll write the letters for you. All you have to do is sign it and just send it back, And I wrote it in simplified language so that people were able to understand it and what they were doing. So that's basically how Global Importune started, from Ralph Nader's suggestion in 1996, 30 years ago. Now, as a matter of fact, I'm celebrating our 30th year of doing this. I've been doing this just about every single month consistently since 1996. One of the things, as I said, they obviously wanted to cut off the head of the organization, and they tried unsuccessfully, but they were still able to petition and demonstrate against the government. So one of the things the people were doing from Tepoztlan was they're going to petition against the government, and they got into a car caravan, and they were going, I think, to the capital, and on their way, they were met by soldiers. And if I recall the incident, that the soldiers shot into some of the buses, and some people were killed as a result of this demonstration. That it was a nonviolent demonstration. All they were going to do was just to peacefully demonstrate against the golf course there. This Jack Nicklaus style golf course they were wanting to build. So eventually, as I said, a few people were killed during the excursion, and I think that was one of the catalysts that helped me get more interest in the Tepoztlan 3, even though it took quite a while, but actually for the Tepoztlan 3 to be eventually released.
Yeah, I'll just go on ahead. I'll follow you.
All right. those are some of the political prisoners we helped release. And this very similar to Ralph Nader's office. I wish I can find the photograph of Ralph Nader's office, but it's like this, where it has stuff all over, and I know where most of the stuff is, so if I want to get anything, I can just go right ahead and just pull it out there.
Let's go back a little here.
Let's see. And organized mist, that's what Ralph would call his office.
I always refer to as controlled chaos.
That's what I looked like when I was a young man. And my wife Allison. What else? Let's see. Actually, it's not really that interesting now that I look at it. It's just. What do I have? Here. Oh, this I didn't even get to going to Palestine yet. Well, this is one of my most favorite photographs. In 2017, I went to Hebron, which was in Palestine. And basically, you know how when you were a kid and you have the safety patrol who makes sure that you can cross the street and you don't get hit by cars? That's basically what this is. But this was a program run by the Christian peacemakers. And basically what we did was, we as members were on the safety patrol watching to make sure that Palestinian children could safely get to school without being harassed by the Israeli settlers or Israeli soldiers. So this is one of my most favorite photographs here. And I did that on a volunteer basis.
Get a little footage of this while we're...
This is from the night at the... God, I hate this guy. This was sitting right next to... Oh, where's... The book, Fire in My Bones. And I have it over here somewhere. But this is one of my favorite photos. I know. This is what I ended up purchasing so that I legitimized the reason for me actually going over there and standing by the book. So I had to buy something so that Allison, I made it look like I actually came over there for something. So this is one of my favorite things I've had for like 37 years.
That's actually really cute.
Nader, of course.
Oh, that was about the auto recalls, wasn't it?
That's what, yes, he originally became famous.
That's what I remember from it, yeah.
Ralph Nader's story. So, that he was telling me. So, it's 1960 something or other. And he's written a book about unsafe at any speed. Now, obviously, the automobile industry didn't really like this. So what they decided to do was they were going to entrap Ralph. Now, you have to visualize Ralph as this tall, skinny guy, kind of geeky-looking guy. Now, so he's in the supermarket in 1963-64, and he's scheduled to testify. Excuse me. He's scheduled to testify about unsafe at any speed in Congress soon as a result. So he's standing in the supermarket, and all of a sudden this woman comes up to him, And as I said, you know what Ralph Nader looks like, big geeky guy. And he's like one of these. The woman's one of these Marilyn Monroe type, with the big bullet bra, the whole thing, really gorgeous woman. And she comes up and says to him, "Hey, I was wondering if you could help me. I have a couch that needs to be moved. I was wondering if you could actually do this for me," and everything. Now, as I said, you've seen Ralph. Ralph is not a muscle man. Ralph is not this huge. How is it that out of all the guys in this supermarket, this one woman comes up and comes to him? So clearly it was a chance to try to entrap him to not disfigure
tarnish his.
to tarnish. That's it. To tarnish, his image, because they knew he was going to do it. And so what they also were doing, the auto industry, was they was tapping his phone, they was following him, and they were harassing him, among other things, and trying to get any dirt they could possibly can on Ralph Nader. And as I said, he lived like, well, he still does also. It's just amazing, Ralph Nader. Point of this story was that eventually, and he was able to find out all this information about this, and he ended up suing the automobile industry. And the money that he got from the suit, that's where the money he used to start Public Citizen. That's where the money actually came from the suit he filed against the automobile industry, because you cannot intimidate a member of Congress in order to, not a member, not a person who's testifying. He was before Congress, so you can't do that. And so he knew that, and he was able to sue the automobile industry.
Because wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. This is. I was in China and I got my favorite hat. This Chinese visor. I don't know why. Oh, I know. I ended up trading this with something with the Chinese guy. Let's see, what else do I have that's interesting?
Like, was that a copy of a photo?
Yes. That was taken right around the corner from the Italian market in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You know where Rocky ran?
Yeah, up that big step.
Yeah. So the thing about me is that I never know from one day to the next what I'll be doing. There's no real schedule. I get up in the morning and I might end up having to write a press release because a political prisoner has been released, or letting other people know about it. Or I might get up in the morning and realize that I have to go to the internet and begin searching for next month's letters. Actually, let me explain a little bit about what I do. Every month, I'm sure you're familiar with Amnesty International, but every month I go to the Amnesty International website on behalf of political prisoners, and I look for cases that they have actually researched and deemed appropriate. So what I do is I take that information off the website and I end up writing a letter on behalf of that political prisoner. And what I do is I take those letters, I then send the letters to members of my group. I have the world's largest Amnesty International letter signing group in the world. The average Amnesty International letter group has anywhere from 20 to 30 people in it. 20, 30, maybe 50 people in it. I have, depending on the time, I have anywhere from 350, maybe 400 people on my letter signing group participating. And I've been doing this for 30 years, as I said, just about every single month, with the exception of the 6 months that was gone out of the country. And our group has been responsible in part for the release of at least 619 Amnesty International political prisoners that we know of. Obviously, it's not just my group that's doing this. The Amnesty International groups all over the world are doing this as well. But what I do is I send the letters, I write the letters on behalf of the Amnesty International political prisoner. If you were a member of my group, what I would do is I take the letters, I would then send them to you. You'd read the material, and it would say something, for instance, if it was a political prisoner from Kenya, it would say, "Enclose, we, the undersigned, urge you to release Amnesty International political prisoner X." this person has been unjustly imprisoned, and we call for his immediate and unconditional release. So that would be something like that, and it would have some of the background as to why that particular person was arrested. So if you're a member of the group Global Importune, I would send that letter to you. You would read the letter, sign it if you agree with it, put it back in an envelope that already has a stamp on it. The letter comes back to me in the mail, and when I get that letter, what I do is I take those letters and I put them all together in a bunch of letters, and I send them to the offending country. As I said, this one, let's say, is on its way. As I said, this one is on its way to Kenya. So, but before I send it, what I do is I'd make 2 copies of the letter. One copy of the letter would go to the Kenyan ambassador in Canada. The other copy of the letter would go to the Canadian ambassador in Kenya, which also said, on behalf of 350 Amnesty International, on behalf of 350 Global Importune members, we urge you to release political prisoner X. And the original copy would go to the Kenyan official. So that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years, just about every single month or so. And as I said, we've helped release a lot of Amnesty International political prisoners, among other things.
And you have that.
No.
Well, if you're sending them to me, that's totally fine.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay, go
this
ahead.
is one of the reasons I do what I do, in a sense. At UFL, years ago, we were doing a project on behalf of a political prisoner in, Felipe. God, I'm forgetting the country. Oh, gosh.
Looks like Malaysia.
No, it's not. Geez, that's not Malaysia. Okay. Well. Okay, don't go on. Let me out. I got to point it. And we urge the kids to write on behalf of a political prisoner who was imprisoned because he was displaying a banned flag, and they ended up doing drawings on behalf of a prisoner. And this was done by 7-year-old Laura, Anne Klink's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So she was 7 years old when she did this. And what she ended up doing was that very next day she went to her school and she told the kids about this. And so these are the signatures of 7-year-olds that she talked to in school at 7 years old about human rights. And so I'm very proud of this. This is one of the reasons why I do what I do. So I encouraged a 7-year-old to actually go, and I think she was 7 or 8 years old that time, and go to her school and talk to her students and teachers about human rights.
That's it.
I've released 2024. There's 23. No, 20. It should be 23 there. There's 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017. These are cases that have been released that we've written letters on behalf of. 2015, 14, 13, 12, 11, 2008, and so on. There are a number of letter years that we definitely help release political prisoners. I just couldn't find some of the way to Hungary, Egypt, and South Africa, I think. This is on its way to Vietnam, but these are all the letters. This is what happens when I send the letters of concern to the...
yeah, because I've never seen them at this end. I've always seen them at the global... when they come... And I love your system, because that's one thing, is that it's so hard to take the time to remember, to write them.
Outstanding public work, public outreach.
So this was the government recognizing you?
Mm-hmm. So there's a great saying, an old Chinese saying, it is a fool who cannot articulate the rhetoric of his opponent. So that's one of the reasons why I love talking to people, whether I agree with them or disagree with them. So